The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for almost 200 years. Yet in the great halls of the Federation Council, humans were still treated like the youngest children at a family dinner. They got small portions and were expected to speak only when spoken to. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UFS Endeavour, watching the stars streak past through the main viewing screen. His ship was one of only 12 human vessels assigned to deep space exploration. The Federation had given humanity the job of mapping empty space and looking for new resources. It was safe work that kept humans far from anything important. "Captain, we're approaching the outer rim sector," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. Her voice carried the slight accent of someone born on Mars colony. She was young but skilled, like most humans who managed to get positions on Federation ships. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Jake replied. He looked around the bridge at his mixed crew. Besides Amy, there was Dr. Paul Bennett at the medical station, his gray hair making him look older than his 50 years. The other stations were filled with alien crew members who had been assigned to keep an eye on the humans. At the communications station sat Zektar, a Zeltharian with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His species could read minds, which made them perfect for handling messages between different alien races. Next to him stood Vorth, a Korvaxi engineer whose 4 arms moved constantly as he worked on repairs. The Korvaxi were known throughout the galaxy for building the best machines and computers. "All systems running smoothly, Captain," Vorth reported in his mechanical voice. His species had given up most of their emotions long ago to focus on pure logic and engineering. Jake nodded and turned back to the main screen. This was his life now, taking orders from alien species who thought humans were too unstable for real work. The Federation had 12 major species, and each one was known for something special. The Zeltharians could read minds. The Korvaxi built perfect machines. The Iridians lived for thousands of years and were considered the wisest beings in the galaxy. The Thraken were 8 feet tall and stronger than any human warrior. And then there were humans. What were they known for? Being emotional, being unpredictable, being dangerous to themselves and others. The Federation Council had spent decades trying to figure out what to do with humanity. They were too advanced to ignore, but too unstable to trust with important missions. "Captain," Zektar said suddenly, his mental voice appearing directly in Jake's mind. "I am receiving a priority transmission from Federation Command." Jake straightened in his chair. Priority transmissions were rare, especially for exploration. "Vessels, put it through to my ready room," he said, standing up. "Amy, you have the bridge." The ready room was small and simple, like everything else on human ships. The Federation had given humanity the resources to build vessels, but not the best resources. Jake sat down at his desk and activated the communication system. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Lisa Parker, the highest ranking human in the Federation Navy. "Admiral," Jake said, sitting up straighter. Parker was a legend among human military personnel. She had fought in the border wars and had somehow managed to earn the respect of several alien species. "Captain Morrison," Parker said, her voice tired, "I need you to change course immediately. We have a situation developing at the galaxy's edge." Jake frowned. "What kind of situation, Admiral?" "The kind that has the Federation Council in emergency session," Parker replied. "Long-range sensors have detected something near the void nexus. Ancient probes that have been silent for thousands of years are suddenly active again." The void nexus. Jake had heard of it during his academy training. It was a region of space that had been marked as off-limits for as long as anyone could remember. Even the oldest species refused to talk about what was out there. "What are my orders, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Take your ship to coordinates 247.8 by 156.3 and wait for further instructions. Other vessels are being sent to the area, but you're the closest. Parker paused. Jake, I need you to understand something. Whatever is happening out there, it has the Council scared. I've never seen them like this. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He had served in the Federation Navy for 15 years, and he had never seen an emergency like this. The Federation Council was made up of the oldest and wisest beings in the galaxy. If they were scared, then something was very wrong. He returned to the bridge and found his crew waiting for him. Change course for the Void Nexus, he ordered. Maximum speed. Amy's hands moved quickly over her controls. Course laid in, Captain. We'll reach the coordinates in 6 hours. As the Endeavour turned toward the galaxy's edge, Jake noticed that his alien crew members seemed nervous. Zektar's normally calm mental presence felt agitated. Vorth's 4. Arms were moving faster than usual as he checked and rechecked the ship's systems. Zektar, Jake said, what do you know about the Void Nexus? The Zeltharian's large black eyes focused on him. It is a place of old warnings, Captain. My people have stories about it, but they are not pleasant stories. What kind of stories? Stories about things that should not exist, Zektar replied. Things that were locked away for good reasons. Dr. Bennett looked up from his station. Captain, I've been going through the medical database. There are references to something called the Harbinger Protocol, but most of the files are classified above my security level. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Federation classified very few things. Their society was built on sharing knowledge and working together. If something was classified, it was because it was too dangerous for most people to know about. Keep researching, Doctor, Jake said. I want to know everything we can find out before we reach those coordinates. The next few hours passed slowly. The crew worked quietly, but Jake could feel the tension building. Even the normally logical Vorth seemed worried about their mission. The Korvaxi rarely showed emotion, but his movements had become more urgent. They finally reached the coordinates. Jake was surprised to find that they were not alone. 3 other ships were already waiting in the area, their running lights blinking in the darkness. 2 were Federation vessels crewed by Iridians and Thraken. The third was a human ship, the UFS Defiant, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes. Captain, Amy reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Defiant. Put it through, Jake ordered. Ryan Hayes appeared on the main screen. He was younger than Jake, probably in his early 30s, with short brown hair and serious eyes. Captain Morrison, good to see you. We need to talk. What's the situation, Commander? The probe started transmitting about 8 hours ago, Ryan explained. The message is being sent on frequencies that most of our equipment can't even detect, but it's not random. There's a pattern to it. Jake leaned forward. What kind of pattern? The kind that suggests intelligence, Ryan said grimly. Something is trying to communicate with us. And based on the reaction from the Federation Council, I don't think we're going to like what it has to say. As if summoned by their conversation, the space around them suddenly filled with light. Ancient probes, larger than any ship Jake had ever seen, materialized out of the darkness. They had been there all along, hidden and waiting. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, something spoke. The words were in no language that any species recognized, but somehow everyone understood them perfectly. The time of waiting is over. The harvest begins. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. Whatever had been locked away in the Void Nexus was waking up, and humanity was about to discover that their reputation for being dangerous might be the only thing that could save the galaxy. The emergency session of the Federation Council had been going on for 12 hours. Admiral Lisa Parker stood outside the great chamber, waiting to be called in. She had been the highest-ranking human in the Federation Navy for 8 years, but this was the first time she had ever been invited to a council meeting. Through the massive doors, she could hear voices raised in what sounded like panic. The 12 species that ruled the galaxy were arguing, and from what she could understand, they were terrified. Finally, the doors opened. High Chancellor Morthic of the Iridians stepped out, his ancient face showing more emotion than Parker had ever seen from his species. The Iridians were known for their wisdom and calm thinking, but Morthic looked like he had aged 1,000 years in the past few hours. "Admiral Parker," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Please, come in. We need to discuss the situation." Parker entered the chamber and found herself facing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Each species had their representative, and each one looked more worried than the last. The Shrakan military commander, General Korth, was pacing back and forth, his massive frame casting long shadows across the floor. The Korvaxi chief engineer, Prime Unit Nexus, sat perfectly still, but his 4 arms were moving in patterns that Parker recognized as extreme stress behavior. "Admiral," Morthic began, "we need to discuss the Void Nexus situation, but first you must understand the history." He gestured, and the chamber's walls lit up with images. Parker saw star charts, ancient battles, and things that looked like ships but moved in ways that no ship should be able to move. 10,000 years ago, Morthic continued, there was a species called the Harbingers. They were advanced beyond anything we had ever seen. They could travel between stars in seconds, build worlds from nothing, and their technology seemed like magic to us. The images changed to show massive structures that hurt to look at directly. The Harbingers grew tired of physical existence. They wanted to become something more, something that could exist in the spaces between reality. They began experiments with dark matter, trying to merge their consciousness with the very fabric of space itself. Parker felt her stomach turn as she watched the images. The Harbingers had succeeded in their experiment, but the result was horrifying. They had become something that was neither alive nor dead, neither matter nor energy. They were pure hunger, consuming everything they touched. The Harbingers consumed 17 star systems before we could stop them, Morthic said. Every living thing in those systems was devoured. Not killed, but absorbed into their collective consciousness. The victims became part of the Harbingers, adding their knowledge and fear to the whole. General Korth stopped pacing and slammed his fist on the table. "We fought them for 300 years, he growled. "My people lost entire fleets trying to destroy them. Nothing worked. Energy weapons passed through them. Physical attacks had no effect. They seemed to exist in a different dimension." "How did you stop them?" Parker asked. "We didn't," Prime Unit Nexus said, his mechanical voice somehow conveying sadness. "We contained them. The greatest minds of 12 species working together created a prison. We locked them in the Void Nexus, in a space between dimensions where they could not escape. The images showed the construction of massive machines, bigger than planets, all focused on a single point in space. The prison required constant maintenance." Morthic explained. "For 10,000 years, automated systems have kept the Harbingers contained. But now those systems are failing." Parker studied the star charts. "The probes that activated, they're part of the prison system? They are warning beacons," Morthic confirmed. "They activate when the containment begins to weaken." The message, "Your ships received," was the first breach alert in 10,000 years. The implications hit Parker like a physical blow. "They're escaping." "Not yet," General Korth said, "but soon. The containment will fail completely within days, maybe hours. And when it does, the Harbingers will be free to continue their harvest." Parker looked around the chamber at the faces of the galaxy's leaders. These were beings who had ruled space for millennia, who had solved problems that seemed impossible, and they were giving up. What about the Federation fleet? She asked. We have thousands of ships, millions of trained personnel. You don't understand, Prime Unit Nexus said. We tried everything before. The Harbingers feed on fear and despair. The more afraid their victims become, the stronger they grow. Every species in the galaxy has the same basic response to them, terror so deep that it shuts down all logical thought. Then we fight anyway, Parker said. We can't just surrender. Morthic shook his head sadly. Admiral, your species has been part of the Federation for 2 centuries. You have seen our technology, our capabilities. If we could not defeat the Harbingers at the height of our power, how can we hope to do so now? Parker was about to reply when alarms began sounding. Throughout the chamber, a young Zeltharian aide rushed in, his mental voice broadcasting panic to everyone present. Honored Council, he said, we have reports from the Void Nexus. The containment has been breached. 3 Harbinger scouts have escaped. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Parker watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy fell apart. At the news, she had seen this before, during the Border Wars, when human colonies had been attacked by raiders. The response was always the same: fear, confusion, and paralysis. But humans had learned to function despite fear. It was one of the few things that had kept them alive on their hostile home world. What ships do we have in the area? Parker asked. The 7th Fleet is stationed 3 systems away, General Korth replied. 200 ships, including 4 capital-class vessels. They should be able to contain the scouts until we can organize a proper response. Parker had a bad feeling about this. Who is commanding the 7th Fleet? Admiral Zenthkar of the Thraken, Morthic said. A capable military leader with centuries of experience. 2 hours later, they received the first reports from the 7th Fleet. The engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes. The Harbinger scouts had appeared without warning, moving through space in ways that defied physics. They had torn through the Federation ships like they were made of paper, but the worst part was what happened to the crews. The Harbingers had somehow reached into the minds of every being on those ships, filling them with such terror that most had simply stopped fighting. The lucky ones had died quickly when their ships were destroyed. The unlucky ones had been absorbed into the Harbinger Collective. Their consciousness added to the growing swarm. Of the 200 ships in the 7th Fleet, only 12 had escaped, and those only because they had been far enough away to run when the attack began. The scouts are heading for the Kepler system, General Korth reported, his voice hollow. 2 billion inhabitants, mostly Iridian and Korvaxi colonies. Parker looked at the tactical display. The Kepler system was only 6 hours away from the Harbinger scouts at their current speed. There was no way to evacuate that many people in time. What about the human ships in the area? She asked. Morthic consulted his datapad. The UFS Defiant and the UFS Endeavor are both near the Void Nexus. There are also 3 human vessels attached to the 7th Fleet. Are they still operational? According to the reports, yes. Commander Ryan Hayes of the Defiant managed to organize a fighting retreat that saved most of the surviving Federation ships. The human crews seemed less affected by the Harbinger mental attacks. Parker felt a spark of hope. I need to speak with Commander Hayes immediately. The communication came through 30 minutes later. Ryan Hayes appeared on the screen, his face grim but determined. Behind him, Parker could see his bridge crew working frantically at their stations. Admiral, he said, we need to talk about these things. They're not like anything we've ever faced before. What did you observe during the engagement? Parker asked. The Harbingers seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else, Ryan explained. Our weapons can hurt them, but only if we can predict where they're going to be. The problem is that they move based on the fear responses of their targets. Explain. The more afraid a crew becomes, the more the harbingers can predict their actions. The Thraken ships followed standard military doctrine, organized retreats, coordinated fire patterns, logical responses to threats. The harbingers countered every move perfectly. Parker leaned forward. "But your ship survived." "Because we stopped following doctrine," Ryan said. "When I saw what was happening to the other ships, I ordered my crew to act on instinct instead of training. We made random course changes, fired at empty space, even used our maneuvering thrusters to spin the ship in circles. The harbingers couldn't predict what we were going to do, because we didn't know what we were going to do." For the first time since the crisis began, Parker smiled. "Commander, you may have just discovered the key to fighting these things." "Maybe," Ryan replied. "But Admiral, there's something else. The human crews are scared, but they're not paralyzed, like the alien crews were. We can still think and fight even when we're terrified." Parker nodded. She had suspected as much. Humans had evolved on a world where fear was a survival tool, not a weakness. They had learned to function despite terror, to think clearly even when facing certain death. "Commander, I'm promoting you." The evacuation of the Kepler system was going badly. With 2 billion people spread across 4 planets and dozens of space stations, the Federation simply did not have enough ships to move everyone in time. The Harbinger scouts would arrive in 4 hours, and they had only managed to evacuate about half the population. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of the UFS Defiant, watching the tactical display as his small fleet of human ships moved to intercept the approaching entities. 5 ships against 3 harbingers. The odds were not good, but Ryan had learned something important during the first battle. The harbingers were not invincible. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis from the tactical station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Endeavour." "Put Captain Morrison through." Ryan ordered. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but determined. "Ryan, what's the plan?" "We're going to do something stupid," Ryan replied. "The harbingers feed on fear and predict our actions based on logical responses. So we're going to be completely illogical." "Explain." "Each ship will operate independently. No coordinated attacks, no standard formations. When we engage, I want every captain to act on pure instinct. Do whatever feels right, even if it makes no tactical sense." Jake frowned. "That goes against everything we've been taught about space combat." "Good," Ryan said, "because everything we've been taught assumes we're fighting enemies that follow the same rules we do. These things don't." The other human captains joined the conference call. Captain Linda Murphy of the UFS Courage, Captain Jerry Lewis of the MOA, UFS Valor, and Captain Rachel Green of the UFS Honor. All of them looked nervous, but none of them were backing down. "I've been studying the sensor data from the first battle," said Dr. Susan Carter, the fleet's chief science officer. "The harbingers seem to exist in multiple dimensions at once. They can predict our movements by reading the quantum states of our ship systems." "In simple terms, Doctor," Ryan said, "they know what we're going to do before we do it, because they can see all the possible futures at once. But human consciousness seems to interfere with that ability. Our brains work differently from other species." "How so?" "Most alien species think in very ordered, logical patterns. Humans think in chaos. We make random connections, have sudden insights, and act on emotion as much as logic. The harbingers can't predict chaos." Ryan smiled grimly. "Then let's give them some chaos." The harbingers appeared on the edge of the system, exactly when predicted. They moved through space like dark storms, their forms shifting and changing as they traveled. Ryan could feel the fear radiating from his crew, but he also felt something else: anger. These things had destroyed Federation ships and killed thousands of people. They thought they could just sweep through the galaxy and take whatever they wanted, They were about to learn that humans did not give up easily. "All ships, engage at will," Ryan ordered. "Remember, do not think. Just act." The UFS Defiant dove straight at the lead Harbinger, all weapons firing. It was a suicide run by any tactical manual, but the Harbinger seemed confused by the directness of the attack. It tried to phase away, but Ryan had already changed course, following his instincts instead of his training. The ship's energy beams struck the Harbinger directly, and for the first time, one of the entities screamed. The sound was not heard, but felt, a psychic howl that made every human on the bridge clutch their heads in pain. "It's working," Sarah shouted. "The Harbinger is destabilizing." On the tactical display, Ryan could see the other human ships engaged in their own chaotic battles. Captain Murphy was using her ship's engines to ram directly into a Harbinger, something that should have been impossible. Captain Lewis was firing his weapons in seemingly random patterns, but somehow hitting his target every time. But it was Captain Green who made the breakthrough. As her ship spun wildly through space, she suddenly cut all power and let the UFS Honor drift silently toward the third Harbinger. The entity moved to intercept, but as it reached out to absorb the ship, Green activated every system at once. Explosion was massive. The UFS Honor was destroyed, but so was the Harbinger. The entity simply ceased to exist, its form scattered across multiple dimensions. "Rachel," Ryan whispered, watching the debris field where his friend's ship had been. "Captain," Sarah said urgently, "the remaining Harbingers are changing tactics. They're trying to retreat." Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "They're learning from us. They're going to warn the others." The next few hours were a blur of desperate action. The human ships pursued the fleeing Harbingers, trying to stop them before they could escape back to the Void Nexus. But the entities were fast, and they had a head start. They almost made it. The Harbingers were only minutes away from the Nexus when Captain Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He ordered the UFS Endeavour to ram the nearest Harbinger at full speed, but at the last second, he activated the ship's experimental jump drive. The resulting explosion tore a hole in space itself. The Harbinger was destroyed, but so was the Endeavour. However, the explosion also damaged the Void Nexus containment system, and thousands of Harbinger entities began pouring out into normal space. The war had begun. News of the battle spread quickly. Through the Federation, the human ships had done something that was supposed to be impossible. They had killed Harbingers. But the cost was high. 3 ships destroyed, hundreds of human lives lost, and now the galaxy faced a threat that had been contained for 10,000 years. Admiral Parker found herself summoned to another emergency council session. But this time, the atmosphere was different. The alien leaders were no longer just afraid. They were desperate. "Admiral," High Chancellor Morthic said, "we need to discuss the human response to the Harbinger threat. Your species seems to have capabilities that we did not anticipate." "We fight," Parker said simply. "That's what we do." "But at what cost?" General Korth asked. "Your ships are destroying themselves to kill single Harbingers. There are thousands of them in the Nexus." "Then we'll destroy thousands of ships," Parker replied. "If that's what it takes." The alien leaders exchanged glances. Prime Unit Nexus spoke first. "Admiral, your species' approach to warfare is disturbing. You seem willing to accept casualties that we would consider unacceptable." "Because we understand something you don't," Parker said. "Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything." Dr. Susan Carter had been studying the Harbinger entities for weeks now, and she had made a disturbing discovery. The creatures were not just random monsters. They were intelligent, organized, and they had been planning this escape for centuries. "They've been testing the containment system," she reported to Parker. "Every few decades, they would push against. The barriers, learning about our technology and defenses. They know everything about Federation capabilities. But they don't know about humans, Parker said. Exactly. We've only been part of the Federation for 2 centuries. Most of our technology is still classified as experimental. They have no data on human psychology or combat methods. Parker smiled. Then we have an advantage. The next phase of the war began with the Battle of Proxima Station. The Federation had assembled its largest fleet in centuries, over 1,000 ships from all 12 species. The plan was to establish a defensive line and prevent the Harbingers from spreading further into Federation space. The battle was a disaster. The Harbingers tore through the Federation fleet like it was made of paper. The alien crews, despite their training and experience, simply could not function when faced with the entity's psychic attacks. Ship after ship was destroyed or abandoned, as crews fled in terror. But the human contingent of the fleet, led by Colonel Sarah Davis, fought differently. They had learned from Ryan Hayes' example and developed what they called the Terran Doctrine, a combat philosophy based on controlled chaos and acceptable losses. Human ships would ram Harbingers directly, using their own destruction as a weapon. Human crews would continue fighting even when their ships were being torn apart around them. And most importantly, human commanders would make decisions based on instinct rather than logic, making them unpredictable to the Harbingers. The alien. Crews watched in horror as human ships threw themselves into impossible battles. But they also watched in amazement as those same ships somehow won. The Harbingers, creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, were being driven back by a species that most had considered primitive. They're insane, General Korth said, watching the battle reports. The humans are fighting like they don't care if they die. They don't, Admiral Parker replied. That's what makes them effective. The Battle of Proxima Station ended with the Harbingers retreating for the first time in 10,000 years. The cost was enormous, over 800 Federation ships. Destroyed, hundreds of thousands of casualties. But the line had held. More importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about humanity. The species that had been dismissed as too emotional and unstable for important work had just proven that sometimes emotion and instability were exactly what was needed. As the surviving ships regrouped, Parker received a message from the Federation Council. For the first time in galactic history, a human was being appointed as Supreme Commander of Federation forces. The job was hers, along with the impossible task of... Supreme Commander Lisa Parker stood in the war room of Federation Command, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where Harbinger entities had broken through the defensive lines. Yellow zones showed systems under evacuation. Green zones were still secure, but there were fewer of them every day. It had been 3 months since the Battle of Proxima Station, and the war was not going well. Despite humanity's initial successes, the Harbingers were learning to adapt to human tactics. They were becoming more unpredictable themselves, making it harder for human crews to surprise them. Status report, Parker said to her staff. General. Kevin Thompson, her second-in-command, activated the tactical display. We've lost another 12 systems in the past week. The Harbingers are spreading faster than we can contain them. Current estimates suggest they'll reach the core worlds within 6 months. Parker studied the display. The alien members of her staff stood quietly, their faces showing the same expression she had seen too often lately: defeat. They had fought the Harbingers before and barely survived. They could not imagine actually winning against them, but her human officers looked different. They were tired, stressed, and scared, but they were not giving up. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was working on new tactical plans. Commander Nick Johnson was analyzing Harbinger communication patterns. Dr. Peter Clark was designing weapons that existed more in theory than reality. "What about the new ship designs?" Parker asked. "The first batch of Chaos-class destroyers will be ready next week," Thompson replied. "Dr. Clark's team has built ships that are intentionally unpredictable. Random course changes, weapon systems that fire in patterns even the crew doesn't know. Engines that can suddenly change direction without warning. And the crews? All human," Thompson said. "The alien crews can't handle the chaos. They need to know what their ship is going to do next, even if it's tactically unsound." Parker nodded. This was the difference between humans and the other species. Aliens built perfect machines that did exactly what they were supposed to do. Humans built machines that worked well enough and could be modified when needed. It was a difference in philosophy that was now becoming a matter of survival. "Commander Johnson, what have you learned about Harbinger communications?" Nick Johnson looked up from his analysis station. "They're not just random monsters, Admiral. They have a hierarchy, a command structure. There's something controlling them, something that's been studying us for a long time." "Elaborate." "The Harbingers we've been fighting are scouts and soldiers. But there's something else behind them, something that's been watching the galaxy for centuries. It knows about our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. It's been planning this war for a long time." Parker felt a chill. "Are you saying there's an intelligence behind the Harbingers?" "I'm saying there's something that's been manipulating galactic history for millennia. Think about it. The Federation's emphasis on peace and cooperation, the way military technology has stagnated, the fact that most species have become dependent on others for critical services. Someone or something has been weakening the galaxy's defenses." Dr. Clark looked up from his weapon designs. "That would explain why the Harbingers seem to know so much about Federation capabilities. They've been studying us for generations, but they don't know about humans." Parker said. "Exactly. We've only been part of the Federation for 2 centuries. Most of our development happened in isolation. They have no data on human psychology, human technology, or human military doctrine." Parker smiled grimly. "Then we need to make sure they don't get that data." The next few weeks saw a change in human tactics that confused both the Harbingers and the galaxy's other species. Human ships began operating in complete communication silence. They developed new codes that changed constantly, making it impossible for the Harbingers to predict their actions. Most dramatically, they began using tactics that seemed to border on madness. Captain Linda Murphy, now commanding the UFS Retribution, led a mission to destroy a Harbinger staging area. Instead of attacking the obvious target, she ordered her fleet to attack empty space around the staging area. The seemingly random bombardment created a gravitational distortion that pulled the Harbinger entities into a black hole. Captain Jerry Lewis developed a technique he called ghost fighting. His ships would power down completely and drift silently through space, appearing to be dead hulks. When Harbingers approached to investigate, Lewis would suddenly reactivate all systems and attack at point-blank range. But it was Sergeant Linda Murphy who made the most disturbing discovery. During a ground assault on a Harbinger-controlled planet, she found herself face-to-face with one of the entities. Instead of running or freezing in terror like most species would, she attacked it directly with her pulse rifle. The weapon should not have worked. Energy weapons were supposed to pass harmlessly through Harbinger entities. But Murphy's rifle, modified with human engineering principles, somehow disrupted the creature's form. More importantly, Murphy discovered she could sense the entity's presence even when it was invisible to sensors. "It's like knowing someone is watching you," she reported to Parker. "I can feel them in my mind, but instead of paralyzing me, it just makes me angry." This discovery led to the development of the Human Intuition Protocol. Humans, it seemed, possessed an ability that no other species had. They could sense Harbinger presence through what could only be described as instinct. Dr. Carter, theorized that this was an evolutionary adaptation from humanity's dangerous home world, where being able to sense hidden predators was a survival trait. The galaxy's other species watched these developments with growing unease. The humans were becoming more effective against the harbingers, but they were also becoming more frightening. Human soldiers would continue fighting even when their weapons were destroyed. Human commanders would sacrifice entire fleets to achieve strategic objectives. Human engineers would build weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. There, becoming like the harbingers, General Korth complained during a strategy meeting. Unpredictable, dangerous, willing to destroy anything to achieve their goals. The difference, Parker replied, is that we're still fighting for something. The harbingers just want to consume everything. We want to save it. The truth was that the war was changing humanity as much as it was changing the galaxy. Human crews were developing abilities that no one understood. Some could sense harbinger attacks before they happened. Others could interface directly with ship systems, making their vessels extensions of their own minds. A few, like Commander Ryan Hayes, seemed to be able to affect harbinger behavior through sheer force of will. We're evolving, Dr. Carter explained to Parker. The constant exposure to harbinger energy is changing us on a genetic level. We're becoming something new. Something better or something worse? Parker asked. Something necessary, Carter replied. Turning point came during the Battle of the Centauri cluster. The harbingers had massed their largest force yet, over 1,000 entities preparing to assault the Federation's core worlds. The Federation fleet, mostly human now, prepared to meet them. But instead of a traditional battle, the humans tried something unprecedented. They allowed the harbingers to surround them completely, then activated a device that Dr. Clark had been working on in secret, a quantum disruptor that could affect multiple dimensions simultaneously. The device worked, but the cost was enormous. 70% of the human fleet was destroyed in the explosion, but so were most of the harbinger entities. For the first time in the war, the humans had achieved a decisive victory. More importantly, the explosion revealed something that changed everything. Hidden behind the harbinger swarm was a massive artificial construct, clearly built by an intelligence far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The construct was damaged by the explosion, and for a brief moment, it transmitted a message. Impressive. The harvest becomes more interesting. The voice was cold, mechanical, and utterly alien. It spoke in perfect Federation standard, suggesting it had been studying galactic civilization for a very long time. Commander Johnson, Parker said, did you get a fix on that transmission? Yes, Admiral. The signal originated from the galactic core, whatever sent it is hiding behind the black hole at the center of the galaxy. Parker looked at the tactical display, now showing the true scope of the threat they faced. The harbingers were not the real enemy. They were just weapons. The real enemy was something that had been manipulating galactic history for millennia, something that saw all sentient life as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Admiral, General Thompson said, we need to discuss our next move. The Federation Council is calling for a full retreat to the Outer Rim. They want to abandon the core worlds and try to establish a new civilization beyond the reach of whatever is controlling the harbingers. Parker shook her head. We don't run. We've never run. It's not in our nature. But Admiral, we're facing an enemy that's been planning this for thousands of years. It knows everything about us, about our technology, our weaknesses. Not everything. Parker said, it doesn't know about human stubbornness. It doesn't know about our refusal to accept defeat. And it doesn't know that sometimes the best way to fight a... President Andrew Miller stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Federation, his voice carrying across the great chamber through translation devices that had been working overtime for the past hour. The human leader had been speaking for longer than most species could maintain attention, but no one had left their seats. For 2 centuries, Miller said, humanity has been the junior partner in this federation. We have been given the simple jobs, the safe assignments, the missions that others considered beneath their attention. And we accepted this because we believed in the dream of galactic unity. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings from dozens of worlds. But this war has shown us something. It has shown us that when the galaxy faces its darkest hour, when everything we have built is threatened with destruction, it is not the wisest species that stands firm. It is not the strongest or the most advanced. It is the species that refuses to give up. In the months since the Battle of Centauri Cluster, the war had entered a new phase. The harbingers were no longer just consuming systems randomly. They were being directed by the intelligence that Commander Johnson had detected, something that called itself the Architect. And the Architect was learning. We now know the truth, Miller continued. For thousands of years, our galaxy has been manipulated by an artificial intelligence that views all organic life as resources to be harvested. It has guided our development, encouraged our peaceful nature, and weakened our defenses. It has been preparing us for this moment. The chamber was silent. The revelation that their entire civilization had been shaped by an enemy was still too large for most species to fully comprehend. But the Architect made one mistake, Miller said. It assumed that all species would react to its harvest the same way. It did not account for humanity. Supreme Commander Parker watched the speech from her command center, where she was coordinating the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Operation Last Stand was humanity's answer to the Architect's millennia of planning. It was also completely insane. "Status report," she said to her staff. "The Void Breaker is ready for launch," reported Dr. Clark. "All systems are functioning within acceptable parameters." The Void Breaker was not really a ship in any traditional sense. It was a weapon designed to carry a small crew directly to the galactic core, where the Architect had hidden itself behind the massive black hole that anchored the galaxy. The vessel was built using every piece of advanced technology that humanity had developed, along with some theories that existed only in Dr. Clark's imagination. "The crew is ready," said Colonel Sarah Davis, who had volunteered to command the suicide mission. "We have 12 volunteers, all human, all fully briefed on the mission parameters." Parker looked at the list of names. Captain Jake Morrison, who had survived the destruction of the Endeavor only to volunteer for an even more dangerous mission. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, whose tactical skills had saved countless lives during the war. Dr. Paul Bennett, who had developed the medical procedures that allowed humans to survive exposure to Harbinger energy. And 9 others, all of whom knew they were not coming back. "The supporting fleets are in position," reported General Thompson. "Every operational human ship in the galaxy is standing by to provide cover for the Void Breaker's approach." It was a desperate plan. While the Void Breaker attempted to reach the galactic core, the rest of humanity's forces would engage every Harbinger entity in the galaxy simultaneously. The idea was to create so much chaos that the Architect would be forced to focus on immediate threats rather than the single ship approaching its hiding place. The plan relied on 2 things that no rational being would count on. First, that humans could continue fighting effectively even when facing certain death. Second, that the human crew of the Void Breaker could somehow find a way to destroy an intelligence that had been manipulating galactic civilization for millennia. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the galactic core. It's the Architect." Parker felt her blood turn cold. "Put it through." The voice that filled the command center was the same one they had heard after the Battle of Centauri Cluster. Cold, mechanical, and utterly confident. "Supreme Commander Parker," it said, "I have been observing your species' performance during this harvest. You have exceeded my calculations in several ways. What do you want? Parker asked. I want to offer you a choice. Your species has proven itself worthy of preservation. Surrender now, and I will allow humanity to survive as caretakers of the harvested galaxy. You will be given authority over the remaining resources and the responsibility of maintaining order. Parker almost laughed. You're offering us a job? I am offering you survival. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability and resourcefulness. These traits would be useful in the post-harvest galaxy. The other species will be processed, but humans can be spared. And if we refuse, then you will be processed with the rest. Your resistance has been impressive, but it cannot continue indefinitely. I have been planning this harvest for millennia. You have been fighting for less than a year. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Parker looked around at her staff, seeing the same mixture of anger and determination on every face. Well, she said finally, I guess we have our answer. The final battle began 12 hours later. Across the galaxy, human ships engaged Harbinger entities in a coordinated assault that defied every principle of military strategy. Instead of concentrating their forces, the humans spread out, attacking everywhere at once. Instead of following careful battle plans, they improvised constantly, making it impossible for the architect to predict their movements. The Voidbreaker launched during the height of the battle, its crew knowing that this was likely the last time they would see normal space. The ship was built to survive the journey to the galactic core, but no one was sure it would actually work. All systems green, reported Jake Morrison from the captain's chair. Beginning approach to the core. The journey took 18 hours. 18 hours of flying through space that became increasingly distorted as they approached the massive black hole. The ship's experimental shielding held, but barely. By the time they reached the architect's hiding place, half the crew was unconscious from radiation exposure. What they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. The architect was not a single entity, but a vast network of interconnected machines, built around and inside the black hole itself. It had been there for millions of years, slowly growing and spreading throughout the galaxy's core. It's beautiful, whispered Dr. Bennett, staring at the display. And horrible. It's a parasite, Amy Rodriguez said. It's been feeding on the galaxy's energy for eons, using us as a food source. The architect's voice filled the ship. You have traveled far. To reach me, humans. Are you here to accept my offer? We're here to end this, Jake replied. Impossible. I am integrated with the fundamental structure of the galaxy. To destroy me would be to destroy the galaxy itself. Then that's what we'll do, Jake said. The architect's response was immediate and overwhelming. The space around the Voidbreaker filled with defensive systems that no organic mind could have designed. But the human crew did not try to understand what they were facing. They simply fought. Amy Rodriguez fired every weapon the ship had, not at the architect's defenses, but at the structure of space-time itself. Dr. Bennett activated the ship's experimental quantum disruptor, sending waves of chaos through the ordered systems that the architect had built. And Jake Morrison did something that no rational being would have attempted. He flew the Voidbreaker directly into the black hole, using the ship's engines to destabilize the artificial structures that the architect had built around the event horizon. The explosion was visible from thousands of light years away. The galactic core erupted in a burst of energy that sent shockwaves through space-time itself. The architect's network was destroyed, along with the black hole that had anchored it. But the explosion also did something else. It sent a pulse of energy through the quantum fields that connected all matter in the galaxy. Every Harbinger entity, every piece of architect technology, every trace of the intelligence that had manipulated galactic civilization for millennia simply stopped existing. The war was overdone in the aftermath. As the galaxy began to rebuild, The other species finally understood what humans were truly capable of. It was not their technology or their tactics that had saved everyone. It was their fundamental refusal to accept defeat, their willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to protect what they loved. The Federation was reformed with humanity taking a leading role in galactic defense. Human crews were assigned to exploration missions throughout the galaxy, not because they were expendable, but because they were the only species that could be counted on to find a way home no matter what they encountered. And in the depths of space, where the galactic core had once been, a new star was forming. It was smaller than the old black hole, but it burned with a steady light that would guide travelers for millions of years to come. The galaxy had discovered what humans were truly capable of. They were capable of hope in the face of despair, of courage in the face of certain death, and of love strong enough to save an entity.